The slam of prison gates closing behind me is a sound that I will never forget. Visiting that prison for work, that slam would be the last warning that I would receive before entering into a world that was completely different than my own as a lawyer. Now, that slam was alarming, but what was more alarming was the disproportionate number of Black inmates behind those prison walls. It was a stark contrast from the diversity in any of the law firms where I had ever worked. Currently, Black inmates make up approximately 38% of the federal prison population. Now, Black attorneys in 2023 made up just 5% of the legal profession, but Black people make up 13.6% of the US population. The overrepresentation of Black people behind bars and the underrepresentation of Black people in law firms and the legal industry rattled me. But what could be done to change these numbers? I knew that the solution wasn't simple, but I knew that I had to do something. Diversity in the legal profession, it matters to me, and it's always mattered to me because over the course of my career as an attorney, my clients have come from diverse backgrounds, racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, gender backgrounds, educational backgrounds. Lawyers, we solve complex, complicated problems, and diversity of perspective and experience brings more innovative solutions to the complex problems that lawyers are tasked with solving. Now, several years ago, going back to those facilities and seeing the disproportionate number of Black people behind bars, I would leave this facility feeling a range of emotions: sadness, shock, despair. I thought about my own fate as a lawyer. How did I end up where I was? How was I so fortunate? When I was a kid, my parents, they gave me one of the most impactful material items that they could give me, and those were books. So in second grade in 1993, I wanted to obviously meet President Bill Clinton. And I remember watching the nightly news every night with Tom Brokaw, and my parents would be watching, and I would always hear the name Attorney General Janet Reno on the news. I didn't know what an attorney was, but I knew that she worked with President Clinton, and I wanted to know what she did and how she became an attorney. So I asked my dad one day, how does someone become an attorney? So the answer was upstairs in my World Book Encyclopedia set. So we grabbed this book from the set and we read this passage together. To practice law in most states of the United States, a person must first have a degree from a law school. Now, at that moment, I was a very resolute child. At that moment, my mind was made up. I knew that I wanted to go to law school. The image of Janet Reno on the news, coupled with my newfound knowledge of how to attain her career path, that was a defining moment for me as an 8-year-old little girl. Mom and Dad, thank you for my encyclopedia set. They're right here in the audience. Now, there would be one more moment that propelled me onto the path of becoming an attorney. When I was in high school, I would have the opportunity to put on a suit every day during my summer vacation and shadow an assistant city attorney for the city of Richmond, Virginia. Her name was Kelly, and she was a Black woman. And she was the first attorney that I had ever met in real life. I saw her doing important work that impacted the city, and I knew I wanted to be just like her when I grew up. It was a 90s, 2000s world, and other than Claire Huxtable and Maxine Shaw, the only people that I saw on TV who were lawyers were not Black women. There were no Black women in the books that I read or the media that I consumed. So Kelly showed me what was possible for me as a young Black woman. I went off and I followed Kelly's career path. I became an attorney. My experience with Kelly changed my life. I knew that as a practicing attorney, I wanted to give kids the same positive exposure to the legal profession that Kelly had given me at such a young age. I wanted to do it through books, children's books, and educational opportunities. And so, in 2012, my writing journey began. Now, children can shape their career aspirations based on the materials they're exposed to, and children want to see themselves reflected in the pages of the books that they read. So, on an October evening in 2012, I drove home from the law firm where I was working, and I started writing. And I didn't start writing children's book. I didn't start writing a legal brief. I started writing a children's book about an 11-year-old Black girl lawyer who got kids the right to vote. Now, in law school, I knew I wanted to be a civil rights attorney, but I never imagined that I would be teaching kids about law and civil rights through children's books. But here I was having a great time writing children's books. On that Friday evening in 2012, a new identity was born. I became a lawyer-author. I was becoming a multi-hyphenate. Now, what is a multi-hyphenate? The term originated in the 1970s, and the Cambridge Dictionary defines a multi-hyphenate as someone who does several jobs, especially in the entertainment industry. In the first quarter of 2018, 7.8% of the US population had multiple job titles. So I wasn't alone in being someone who was multi-passionate and had multiple job titles. But in that common DC question, Jessica, what do you do? All too often, I would respond, I'm a lawyer, period. The author part of my identity was nowhere to be found. Now, I felt like I had impact as a lawyer, but being a children's book author was so unexpected. The legal work that I do typically centers on complex emotional issues of workplace discrimination and harassment. I felt like the lawyer side of me was busy fighting for the civil rights of real people. And the children's book author side of me was having fun, writing whimsical, lighthearted stories. I felt like the children's book writer was in Disneyland. I felt guilty. Even more, I had gone to law school. I had passed and studied for the bar and passed the bar with the help of these hundreds of flashcards. There were no flashcards or hard exams associated with writing children's books. There was just a deep, heartfelt desire to tell stories that inspired the next generation of lawyers in the same way that Kelly had inspired me as a kid. So going back to those conversations in which a person would ask, Jessica, what do you do? If a friend or someone who knew me well was standing beside me, they would say, well, Jessica also writes children's books, and they were trying to be helpful, but I wasn't helping myself. My response would often be, "That's just a little thing I do, just a little thing." With those words, I was hiding behind a title and an identity that was comfortable to me. Lawyer, because I'd taken the traditional path to get there, and I was minimizing an identity that was so important to me, which was being a children's book author. Now, I no longer delete my hyphen, and neither should you, and here's why. Courageously asserting all parts of my multi-hyphenated identity has taken me from real legal briefs to mock trial briefs based on the concepts that I teach about in my books. When I was in law school, I thought that the only place that I would have an impact would be in a courtroom. But I was wrong. There's one experience that made me stop calling writing just a little thing I do. Now, if you'll recall, the summer of 2020, the world was experiencing immense isolation, social unrest, division. I know for me, if there was ever a time that I needed hope, that was the time. I'm so happy to say that I found that hope in a young girl named Anaya. I met Anaya during a mock trial program that I hosted based on one of my books. Anaya was a young Black girl about to start middle school, and she just reminded me so much of myself when I was her age. She would show up confidently on screen every day, ready to step into this role of an attorney and argue the case to get kids the right to vote. During that program, I had the honor, the privilege to answer a question for Anaya that I had asked my own father over 20 years ago. How does someone become an attorney? Now, after the program ended, Anaya's mom would keep me updated about her progress, and I looked forward to those emails. And in one of those emails, Anaya's mom, she told me that Anaya had run for the position of the secretary for her school government, and she won her election, which was absolutely no surprise to me. In another email, her mom wrote me saying, "You, ma'am, have introduced Anaya to something that she didn't even know she was interested in for her future endeavors. I'm forever grateful." But I'm the one who's truly grateful. Anaya affirmed my purpose and why I use my experience as an attorney to inspire the next generation. In Anaya, I see hope for our future. I truly hope that I could be for Anaya what Kelly was for me at such a young age, which was a bridge to a future profession. The people that we serve, when we embrace all sides of our identity, they have futures that are not little. Their futures are grand. Their aspirations are grand. Our hyphenated identities, they're not even truly about us. They're about the change that we seek to bring about in the world. Going from law school libraries to elementary school libraries, what I have learned is that the words that lie on each side of my hyphen, they're not my title. They are my calling. Thank you.